Welcome to Easy Math TV. This is Lab 5 out of 8 for an introductory statistics class that uses Posit Cloud and uses R coding in our exploration of introductory statistics for life sciences. And our lab today is titled Normal Distribution. So basically, if you go to your project directory here, there's a list of all the different projects and some other information. We want the folder that says normal distribution, okay? And in that folder, you will see the lab instructions as well as a file that has our code in it. So basically, when you open up Posit Cloud, you don't have any files open. The file we're going to open is normal distribution R code. So that I just want to use that because that's going to get us through this walkthrough pretty quickly compared to like what we would if I had to do a lot of explanation. When you open the HTML file, that's the first thing that I want you to do, basically. Before you do anything, I want you to open the normal distribution.html and view it in a web browser, okay? And that's over here. So I would like you to pause this video and read through the entire thing a couple of times. Familiarize yourself with the explanations, not the actual R code itself, but just the description of what you're going to be doing and some of the concepts that you're going to be learning about are explained in here. So I want you to read through the entire thing on your own, and then stop when you get down here where it says Lab 5 stops here, okay? So just to familiarize yourself with the concepts, you need to read through this entire lab directions on your own, just to see what kinds of plots you're going to be making and the name of any new plot that you're going to be making. There's a new one that you're going to be learning about, as well as like some of the calculations, okay, and what they're going to be used for. So definitely check out that file. But we're just going to be copying and pasting from the R code file down here into the console to run it. And let's switch to our plots tab so that we can see any plots that get displayed. And in the upper right, we're going to see what our actual files, our actual documents and data are going to look like. So that's where the data will appear in the environment, okay? So let's go ahead and download our data and load it into the environment. So we have download.file and then load into our environment. So those two commands, download it first and then load it into the environment. So now you should see this data set called BDIMS, and by the way, that's body dimensions. So we have body dimensions of males and females. There are 507 individual observations, so that's 507 people, and 25 measurements that were taken. So all of these are body dimension measurements, and they're kind of hard to figure out what they mean, but when you see .gi, so the .gi means girth, and DI is probably a length or dimension, something like that. But we're not going to be using those. The measurements we're going to be looking at are all the way down at the bottom here, basically height and weight. And then we're going to be separating out our data by male and female. So we're going to be seeing how we do that. Okay. You can actually, if you're interested, you can actually see what the range of ages are of our data set. But these are relatively people who are younger, like I think they're all people in their 20s, if I'm not mistaken. But if you're curious, you can actually look at what the maximum and the minimum age is of people in this data set. Okay. But anyway, their body dimensions. And the first thing we're going to do is just take a look at the first 6 rows. So I'm just going to type copy and paste the command head parenthesis BDIMS close parenthesis, and that's just going to show us the first 6 rows of data. So we can see, at least in the first 6 rows, that the ages are between 21 and 28 there. And all of the first 6 rows are sex. The sex is number 1, and basically when sex is 1, those are the males. When sex is equal to 0, those are the females. So we're going to be separating those out, okay, and looking at each one separately, because we do expect male and female body dimensions to be slightly different. It's just a fact. So that's the next 2 lines of code that you see here. We're going to be, this is a new function that you're going to be introduced to. It's called subset, and the subset function separates or subsets your data by whatever factor you tell it to. So it's going to subset our body dimensions by sex, okay, or by sex assigned at birth. So we're going to just hit copy and paste, and we're going to separate it out into male and female. So we have the female entries in this data set. There's 260 of them, and of the male entries, there's 247. And what I want you to notice is that 247 plus 260 is equal to 507. So we have all 507 observations split into male and female. Okay? All right. So the first thing we're just going to do is something very familiar. We've done this before. Let's just make a quick histogram of the female heights. And that's just FDIMS $height. And the function is histogram. So let's just make a quick histogram of that. And that's just going to show us that indeed our data does have, we do have some hope here that it may be normally distributed, because we are seeing a kind of symmetry here, where and we're also seeing that the tallest rectangles are in the center, and then as the further out from the center you go, the shorter the rectangles get. So that is our kind of bell curve that we're expecting, or bell shape that we're expecting. So we do have some hope here that our data might be normally distributed. The next thing we need to do is calculate the mean and the standard deviation. So these 2 lines of code will calculate the mean and the standard deviation of the female heights. And that gets calculated up here in the environment. So you can actually see that female height mean is 164.87, and the female height standard deviation is 6.5446, so and so on. Okay? Mean and standard deviation. We need those numbers in order to compare our data with a normal set of data from this population. So we're going to actually simulate, we're going to actually create a data set that is normally distributed, or is from a normal distribution, using this mean and this standard deviation. But before we do that, let's look at a relative frequency histogram. So this line of code, HIST parenthesis FDIMS $height, comma, probability equals true, is going to give us a relative frequency histogram. And then superimposed on top of that is going to be a bell-shaped curve, which these 3 lines of code does for us. It basically creates a blue line in the shape of a bell curve, and that bell curve is going to consist of x values from between 140 and 190, which is the range of our heights, with a mean equal to the actual mean that we calculated and a standard deviation equal to the standard deviation that we calculated, okay? So you will see that. You will see that line that appears on top of our histogram. So I'm just going to copy and paste this entire section of code. Copy, paste, and you're going to see a relative frequency histogram. So the actual heights of the rectangles are about the same as they were for the frequency histogram. But what I want you to notice is that the y values are different. So on the y-axis, in the first histogram we made, those are just actual frequencies, like how many, those are counts. But in the new one, those are actual probabilities. Okay, so those have turned into probabilities. So, and that blue line there is a normal curve. Okay, it's a normal curve. And what we would like is for those rectangles that we see to be kind of close in height and location, you know, so that the height should kind of match the height of the curve in that, for that area, for that range of x values, height values. So it does seem to, everything is looking pretty good so far, you know, in terms of, like, I would say for our actual data looking a little bit normal, but you know, you have to make that decision yourself. The new plot that we're learning right now is called a QQ plot. So I'm going to copy and paste the next two lines of code and just kind of explain to you what you're looking at. But I'm not going to interpret it for you. I'm going to ask you to do the interpretation. So this is described in the comments. The comments actually tell us this is a QQ plot or a normal distribution plot of the female heights. So the female heights are along the y-axis, and along the x-axis are their z-scores. So for each dot, you have the actual height itself compared to its actual z-score, okay? If the data are normally distributed, we should see dots following the line very closely. So this is your first time seeing one of these, and since quantile plots, that's another name for this type of plot. It's called a quantile plot. Since they do tend to contain variation, it's not going to be perfect. We want to understand, like, so how much variation is acceptable, right? Like, let's make a plot of data that does come from a normal distribution so that we can compare that with our QQ plot, and that's going to help us determine just how closely these dots are to the line, and how much variation is acceptable. So in front of you this is just a set of simulated data now that comes from a normal distribution, and how you can expect the dots to sort of not be perfect. It's not perfect, right? So they do not perfectly align with the diagonal line that you see, and this is the kind of random chance variation you can expect from your data. So you get to decide if our actual QQ plot does in fact come close enough. Is this close enough to an actual normal data set? Okay. And there's another function called QQ norm sim that will simulate heights data, And this is another way that you can actually now, but this is going to be a little hard to see because the actual plots are going to be, you're going to see multiple plots. So I'm going to expand this window momentarily just so that we can see the plots a little bit better. QQ norm sim parenthesis FDIMS $ HGT close parenthesis, and we're going to hit enter. And this is basically simulated data from our female heights, and we can actually zoom to see a little bit better what those plots actually look like. So there are 6 of them here that just simulates data from the same data set. Okay, so you can actually use that to kind of also make a better judgment call on how good our data actually is to being from a normal distribution. Okay, and then there's a couple questions that you're asked to answer, since kind of the likely scenario is that you are going to determine that the data is in fact normally distributed. So assuming a random sample of independent observations, let's read question number 1. Question number 1 is, what is the probability that a randomly chosen young adult female is taller than 6 feet, which is around 182 centimeters? So these heights are in centimeters. So the next thing is to calculate the normal probability that would be above 182. So I'm just going to copy and paste that into our window. So that uses the p-norm function, and since we're interested in the probability of a female being taller than that, it's going to be 1 minus p-norm. Okay, so hit enter. So the result there is 0.004434387. So that is the probability that a young adult female chosen at random would have a height of higher than 6 feet, which is around 182 centimeters. Same question, but what is the empirical or the observational probability? So how would we answer that question? Like from our actual data, what is the probability that a young adult female is taller than 6 feet? So that's this calculation here. So I'm going to copy and paste that line of code. We're taking basically the relative frequency and dividing it by the total number of values in that data set. And lo and behold, the actual relative frequency of females that are above 182 in our data set is 0.003846154. So your job is to kind of comment on how close those two probabilities are to each other, because one of them is the theoretical probability, the other one is the actual calculated or observational probability from our data. So together you've got a bunch of plots to look at that help you to decide whether your data is normal. And then you can, once you decide that, you can use the normal probabilities to calculate theoretical probabilities of different outcomes. And one of the exercises actually asks you to construct your own question and answer your own question from the data and from a normal distribution. Okay, so like, subscribe, comment down below. That's your walkthrough of like the code that you're actually going to be using in this lab. And then make sure you read it carefully so that you understand what the questions are that are being asked. Okay?